session of the East Hampton Town Board. Carol, would you please read the roll call?
Councilwoman Burke Gonzalez,
Present.
Councilman Lees,
Present.
Councilwoman Overby,
Here.
Councilman Bradman,
Here.
Supervisor Van Slyck.
Present. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today's meeting will begin with the public portion where any member of the public may call in and address the board on any topic. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Today's topics will be the restoration of the Hedges Parsons Colonial Cemetery. We have David Lease and Zach Studenroth of the Burying Ground Preservation Group presenting. We'll have a stormwater abatement project memorandum of understanding with the Friends of George Pond, presented by Kim Shaw and John Jolnicki, followed by New York Climate Act, Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, Gordy and Racky, followed by liaison reports and resolutions. But before we get started with public comment, I just want to bring the community up to date as to our status regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. The current average in Suffolk County for positive test cases is over 6%. It's been hovering about 6.2 to 6.3% the last several days. This is extremely concerning. There's a major resurgence of the disease within Long Island. And I think especially within East Hampton, we've seen the numbers increase dramatically. In East Hampton, the cases year to date were 276 after 32 weeks of this pandemic. 276 as of October 17th. That number has doubled in less than 8 weeks. We now have over 551 cases year to date as of December 6th. This is extremely alarming. While we still are at a much lower rate than the rest of the communities that we see in the Long Island, New York area, that is still a very large increase here. This will eventually cause, in very short order, I think, that businesses will have to go back, will be stepping back, imposing new restrictions. The governor is going to be shutting things back down again as these cases really are exploding. So I urge everyone to please do follow what is really our only and very effective tool, which is to continue wearing masks. Do not gather with others outside of your household at this point. That's just not recommended. Stay outside if you have to be with other people. Wear a mask and stay distance. Be very cognizant about what you touch, and about keeping your hands clean and disinfecting surfaces. We're seeing the rollout of vaccines, but it's likely to be midsummer before the vaccine's widely distributed and available to everyone. The priorities will be at this point to protect our healthcare workers. The vaccine will be distributed to those frontline healthcare workers and those at highest risk first. But the other way that we can really help our healthcare workers and keep them safe is to just not get sick in the first place. We're seeing increases in the hospitals, both locally and across the island, across the country. Please, let's do everything we can to keep everyone safe. At this point, we'll move on. Michael, if you can tell me whether or not anyone has called in to comment.
There are no current callers on the line.
Okay. In that case, let's move on with our work session agenda items, and we'll take callers as they come in, and we're available to speak directly to them. So today we have the restoration of the Hedges Parsons Colonial Cemetery. Councilman David Lease, being the liaison, has really worked hard with a number of our local cemeteries to help restore them and clean them up and take care of them. And I want to thank him for his stewardship. And you have a presentation, David, of the most recent efforts of the town.
I do. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Supervisor. Michael, if we could just let Zach and Kurt back into the meeting, would be greatly appreciated.
Okay.
And Kurt is the K-E-K.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mike. I'm going to screen share a presentation. I'm just going to set this up for us. So give me one moment. I want to thank the board for having me here today to be able to discuss this. With me today, I have Zachary Studenroth of the Burying Ground Preservation Group and Kurt Kafer, excuse me if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, Kurt, also principals of the Burying Ground Preservation Group. As we know, the town board has supported recently the restoration and preservation of some of our colonial cemeteries by going through a process of cleaning and working with the Burying Ground Preservation Group to fix some of the stone heads. So I just want to go through quickly what got us here. They're going to go through the presentation, and then we'll go on and try to keep preserving history. The Hedges Parsons Cemetery is actually on 58 Old Stone Highway. It is actually directly at the entrance of the Springs School. You'll see actually a sign also for Henrietta Connors that is there. Her home is right behind it. It is one of the cemeteries that the Nature Preserve Committee designated as a location to try to restore because it is on a major thoroughfare for East Hampton, specifically for Springs. A lot of people would see the work happening, and we bring a lot of awareness to these projects because we do know there's other institutional grant opportunities for doing some work onto these old colonial cemeteries that are within the township. During the summer and winter of 2009, Eileen Roman and Richard Whalen worked on behalf of the town's Nature Preserve Committee, initially researched and surveyed a lot of the cemeteries in East Hampton. And they put together a State of East Hampton Cemeteries report in 2009, which is the basis of us moving forward here. Again, 10 years later, we're doing a lot of work, which is great. And the Nature Preserve Committee, including Zach Cohen, really assisted in connecting us together with the Burying Ground Preservation Group, and particularly in my interest in this subject matter. All our work is being done within the state, within the town law, from the New York State Town Law, sections 291 and 296, which governs the municipality's authority to maintain and preserve our colonial and abandoned cemeteries. Again, 58 Old Stone Highway Springs is where the cemetery is located. If you just see in the bottom right here, you'll see the tennis courts and the entrance to Springs School. I do have to say, when the work was being done, a lot of individuals that would go to that school had mentioned to me, they've asked what's happening there. That's why we put the sign up, and they've been very enthusiastic, including Ms. Henrietta also. I'm going to pass this forward onto Zach right now. This is actually how this is the cemetery they were looking from the inside. And Zach, please let me know how you want me to move it forward.
Sure. Is my audio on?
Yes, you're good, Zach.
Hear you, Zach.
Okay, great. Hello, everybody, and thanks so much for inviting us into the work session today. I just want to make a couple of very brief remarks about this work in general, primarily to assure you that all of the work that we do observes the highest standards of preservation and conservation practice. So we approach this work from the standpoint that these historical stone markers are artifacts. They're unique stone artifacts, which are obviously out in the open. They're subjected to all sorts of weathering and other adverse effects, which accounts for breakage, etc., discoloration over time. There are very well developed techniques for addressing and reversing those natural processes. And I'll get to illustrating some of those here, but I first wanted to assure everyone that the techniques that are followed are those which are observed by the best practices in the field. So what we're looking at here in the foreground is a stone that was cleaned a little bit before the others were. I'll get to that process in a minute. What we can also see in the background is a sort of a grayish stone, which appears to be holding up the fence That's in the middle there, next to that one, there it is. And that's actually a very interesting and unique feature of this site, which is that the fence, the wooden picket fence, was actually installed in the middle of the 1800s, and it's supported on these stone posts, which are spaced about 10 feet apart. And so that is an important historical feature of this particular site. And I have to commend the town in having rebuilt and kept painted the wooden pickets which these stone posts support. It is important to define these sites, to surround them so that the public traveling by can understand, and see an enclosed property, historical property of this sort. And that's the function that the fence provides. But it's also important to realize that it is itself a historical feature of this particular property. Can we go to the next slide? There we go. Now, the other aspect of this work is when it's all done, you don't really fully appreciate how physical and how active the intervention in some of these stones can be. These are two stones that were discovered. They had fallen to the ground. Through a little bit of excavation, we discovered the brownstone bases. Those appear as those slotted stones that are below grade. Those are a part of the original tablet. Those were meant to support these two stones, but they're tremendously heavy. And so part of the process of lifting these stones and getting them out of the way for the repair process entails using, in this case, a tripod. Because of the physicality of the work and how extremely heavy these stones can be, safety is always a high precaution. And so here you can see now they're being tipped back up and reset into those bases. So we basically restored the original system by which these stones were supported. We can go to the, the next one. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now, this is Jessie Burns. She's only one of two individuals interred at the site which are not a part of the immediate Parsons family. One of the reasons for doing this work, of course, is that these are primary records. They're carved in stone, but for the period in which they're installed, they're in some cases the unique record of the vital statistics of that particular individual. You will find Jessie Burns listed in the East Hampton town records as the victim of, I believe, cholera in that period in the middle of the 1800s. Why she was there as a member of one of the Hedges families, we don't know, but that's for future research. But this is probably the only record of her life. Her stone had broken, fallen to the ground, and so our intervention here was that of excavating a lower base, which is part of the support system for this tablet. Let's go to the next slide. Well, that's in process here. You can see the lower base is there, slightly below grade in the middle of the slide. That's part of the support. And here, Joel Snodgrass, who is our professional conservator, is in the process of cleaning off old repairs. I believe there was concrete involved in trying to repair this at one point. So that needed to be cleaned away. And you can see that the tablet itself is still joined to that middle base. So our project here was to reassemble all four pieces and put them back together in a stable fashion. I believe that's the next slide. So here's Jessie. Portions of her have been cleaned. If you were to go out to the site today, I think you would discover that center section, which is discolored, is now considerably whiter. We use a cleaning agent, which the National Park Service recommends. It's a very stable, gentle cleaning product, which is meant to remove the biogrowth. That's not soil, that's actually mold. So those are living organisms which are living on the stone and discoloring them. We use this gentle cleaning agent to simply remove all of that. And over time, the marble stones, such as this one, which were white to begin with, will brighten considerably. Our purpose in using that is not simply to make the stone look cleaner or to appear more like it was originally. That's not at all the objective. As you can see from looking at the stone, it's very difficult to read her death date. You can see died, and then underneath that it's October something 1870 something, aged AE 47, I believe. It's very difficult to read that. Of course, you can't read the scripture beneath it. So the cleaning process in many instances is primarily that of making the inscription legible. It also enables us to take a good record photograph for uploading for research purposes to websites, etc., so that those stones are legible and can be read. So that's the purpose of the cleaning. It's not simply to make something look better. Here's an example. Here's Hedges Parsons. This is his burial site that he set aside for family members. And this is a picture of the stone. It's not only discolored with mold and things of that nature, but lichen, that's the yellowish green sort of fuzzy biogrowth at the top. And lichen in this case discolors the stone, but if it's let go further, it can actually begin to eat away at the stone fabric itself. Lichen secretes acids, which disintegrates the stone, and it also sends out little shoots that anchor it to the stone, and they will go into crevices and can structurally begin to break the stone down. So it's important periodically, and we'll get into that later, the idea of developing a maintenance protocol for these sites is to remove that. Here's a picture after cleaning. It's been dramatized because we have a technique of photographing so that we highlight the legibility of the inscription. But you can see the difference between the before and after condition. Let's go to the next one, please, David. So here, I'll just very quickly go through the process. This is S. Foster Parsons. This is the last stone dating from 1920 that was installed here. This is its condition before, and again, that's not soiling, that's mold. It's living on the surface, and it's relatively difficult to read the surface. If we go to the next slide, you can see this is the process of applying this cleaning solution, which is just sprayed on. There's no scrubbing necessary. We don't touch the stone. This is in the act of being cleaned. And the next slide shows the final effect. Now, again, because this is a relatively recent stone, it hasn't suffered very much weathering of any other sort, and so it comes out looking very crisp, very bright and white. The older stones also clean, but they don't necessarily come out to this degree. Okay, next. This is the earliest stone in the site, Mr. Seth Parsons, who dates late 18th century. This has that winged cherub, which is very typical of the period. The emblem in the tympanum at the top of the stone. The problem with this stone was that if you try to read it, you can see that you only get this life, May, something. You can see that there's something missing. And that's because this stone had broken, had been reset into the ground. And here it is after we excavated the lower portion and reattached them together and reset it and cleaned it. So now you can see the entire lower half of the stone. So this man died 1792. He's the earliest one. So this sort of dramatizes the result when we're dealing with stone which has been broken and reset into the ground, that most of the inscription is missing. The next slide will show us something we discovered. That stone fence I was talking about, someone had misunderstood at one point and wanted to save these pieces, and they set them back. But this is actually a granite piece, the top piece of what had been part of the fence. That hole drilled in the top is what helps to anchor the wood to it. So there were two of these at the site, which we had to distinguish as not being actual grave markers, but as being interesting features of the site, which we left in place. But they do not, we don't believe they mark a grave site. And now the next slide shows you those stone posts encircling. There's Seth Parsons, the brownstone off to the right. So these are set at about 10-foot increments, and as you can see, they allow for the attachment of a wooden fence which, as I said before, the town has arranged to reconstruct it. It's kept well painted, and it's a very important feature of the site. I think that's my last slide, David. I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thank you very much. What I want to make sure is that part of the burial ground preservation group's forte is also cataloging all the information from these stones. So again, I've said this in the past, a lot of times it's the last information of this individual is what's on their tombstone. They might not even have anything in the clerk's office. So working with past clerk, current clerk, also working with past town historians, the current town historian, we are able to catalog all the stones, what they're saying, dates of death, and putting it within all of our town records. A couple of final portions of this. This is actually what it looked like just after the cemetery, just after the restoration efforts. You can see they're starting to whiten out. Everything's been put up straight again as far as the stones. And then this is a picture from this morning. I want to really thank the Buildings and Grounds. Yes, Zach, pretty good, right?
That looks great.
Looks really good.
We're thrilled, yeah.
So I want to really also thank Tony Littman and his crews. The Buildings and Grounds Department are the department of for the town that actually oversee the maintenance, the yearly maintenance, blowing out the weeds of these parks. Immediately during this restoration effort, he had our painting crews, Jesse Bennett and then also Marcus, go paint the picket fence. It looks spectacular. The stones are reset. This is a different direction. You can see the fence. It really just pays homage to the heritage of East Hampton. You feel good walking into the cemetery. You almost feel like the individuals that are interned there are saying thank you to you. And moving forward, what I would like to do, based on some of the 2009 State of East Hampton report for our cemeteries, I'd like to move forward with a couple fundamental actions. Some of them we've already taken on, but some of them that are highlighted and italicized, I want to try to bring legislation forward in the next calendar year to make abandoned cemeteries historical landmarks and town property to assure access for maintenance. By doing this one specifically had a designated access and also Suffolk County tax maps. We want to make sure that these properties have their own tax map numbers. I'd like to talk to the board about moving forward with this in the next calendar year. I also want to look into our zoning code and our zoning powers to create legislation that will make it illegal to remove or desecrate cemeteries and grave sites. In our 2009 cemetery report that I've shared, there was a story of the grave site of Ned, an African-American Negro, they said at that time, in the Freetown area, that actually had his grave site desecrated by a developer on a property. I don't want that to happen anymore. I think by designating it with tax maps, it would be extremely helpful for matters of planning. We would know where these cemeteries will be. We can continue to maintain them. We're maintaining our preservation of our fencing lines and other information also. I'm just going to stop sharing this. But I really do I thank the board very much for continuing this journey here. Every year we found some funding lines left over in our cemetery lines. I thank the Nature Preserve Committee. We moved this effort forward. It's got an attraction of other individuals in the area that are assisting in preservation of other cemeteries in the town. And we're now looking at Atlantic Ave Cemetery, one of the Edwards cemeteries, the Bennett Cemetery. And this is something that's not going to happen overnight. All these are going to be preserved. But as long as we keep moving it forward, let's be honest, they're not going anywhere. We hope they don't go anywhere. But what we want to do is we want to make sure we preserve our history. And I thank the Burial Ground Preservation Group for their assistance on this. Kurt, I don't know if you have anything you want to mention at all. You're on mute, Kurt. Just want to mute you.
Kurt, you have to unmute yourself. Can you unmute
Will?
your microphone? Thank you.
I did. No, I think that what Zach presented with what we did at Hedges Parsons and what you said about the overall picture pretty much sums up the importance of this. And we are so grateful and happy to be involved at this point, and we hope to continue to be, because as it was outlined in the presentation and in the plan, we have the equipment, we have the wherewithal, we have the historical sensitivity, and so do you all, obviously. And no, I have nothing else to add, except I'm very happy that that this is happening. Thanks.
Thank you, Kurt. So that's our presentation of the day. We just wanted to make sure we did the Vanscoy Cemetery last year. We did this Hedges Parsons Cemetery this year. We're continuing on the actions. And if the board has any questions of us, please just ask.
Any questions or comments for David?
I just want to say, David, I think this is really exciting and great work. You know, there's just something very intriguing about bringing history alive like this in a tangible way and seeing these stones clearly. Now you can really kind of relate to the site as having involved real living people, which is just fabulous. It's very exciting. I know Zach very well. We know each other from working in the village of Southampton, and I'm really happy to hear about the techniques that you use that, you know, that are respectful of the stone and aren't going to damage it. I just find it fascinating and terrific. So I congratulate you all. Zach, just probably maybe a dumb question, but the fencing around, has it been so long that it's been repaired piece by piece so that it's now actually a restored fence? Can you tell, is any of the wood original or what the status is?
No, I don't believe any of the wood is original when you realize this was probably put in the 1830s or 40s. Wood was better then. and if kept painted, it would have preserved perhaps for 50 or 60 years. But I would guess the wooden elements fell apart long ago. But the spacing, there are aspects of the wood that can be researched to make sure they're historically accurate also. But basically, the stone elements are original, the wood is renewed, and just like any wooden element, like on a house, you have to reshingle the walls, you know, so the wood fabric is updated as needed to be, but the stone is what's important as original.
The stone supports are something I've never seen.
I think of it as the Cadillac of the picket fence. You know, obviously, wood was readily available, and as you well know, we live on a sandbar. There are no quarries on Long Island to quarry the rock to build with. Everything, the headstones themselves, and of course these stone posts had to be imported from somewhere in New England. They had to be quarried, they had to be shaped and drilled with holes so you could put bolts on them. So what we tend to find is rarely at a house site, but sometimes we'll find these at a church or at some kind of a municipal building where there was greater funding to put in something that was architecturally more imposing. But we do find them at cemeteries, not very frequently, but it's important to know what they are when we see them, because they're very important historical features.
It's just great work. It really, I hate to be, you know, I'm not making a joke, but you really do bring history alive by doing it.
Thanks. Yeah, well, we have a lot of fun doing it. I must admit, we enjoy what we do.
I know. I was thinking that as I saw the photographs. It looked like a lot of fun. Hard work, but fun.
It is. Yep.
And also we like to think of these as we did a program in Quogue Cemetery, which was also about fixing and cleaning, but then we were also asked to do a tour. So the title of our tour was Stories in Stone. So I think that's kind of what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you guys. Really, it's a lot of fun.
Our pleasure. Great to see you. Yeah.
What I'd just like to say is I hope, David, that we can put this on the town website and that we could share it with the teaching staff at Spring School, because maybe there's an opportunity. I mean, there were times when, that our kids walk over to Pussy's Pond and they write poetry or they go over to the Jackson Pollock House. I mean, these teachers may want to use, the cemetery as outdoor classroom.
It's a great idea. Yeah.
Great. Definitely. Thank you, Kathy. I'll outreach to Spring School.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's an outstanding presentation, and I want to thank you guys for the presentation. Thank David Lease for moving this project along. in finding the money within the budget to get this moving. I knew Eileen, and she would be very pleased to know that this was happening. She put a lot of her efforts into the report in 2009. And, so I know she's smiling and happy that this is moving forward. Thank you, David. For
That means a lot, Sylvia. I think she would be smiling at all of us right now. God bless her.
Yeah.
So I think it's remarkable the number of colonial era cemeteries that we still have and know about. And one fact that I'm not sure everybody realizes is that abandoned cemeteries in New York State automatically become the responsibility of the town in which they are in, not villages, but actually the towns. And that applies to not just colonial cemeteries. Some people may not even be aware that we recently took on responsibility for Green River Cemetery, for instance, because that was no longer able to support itself. So, we do have a number of cemeteries within the town. And David, I can't say enough about your efforts to bring these cemeteries back to life, if you will, and to restore the stones. And Kurt and Zach, I really appreciate your efforts. It's wonderful to see. It does keep our history to the forefront, which I think is really important to us here in East Hampton. We have quite a history to, in fact, talk about. So thank you all for your efforts, and thanks for joining us today.
Totally. Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next topic today for discussion is stormwater abatement project, memorandum of understanding with the Friends of Georgica Pond. Friends of Georgica is a not-for-profit organization that has been instrumental and has partnered with the town to improve water quality within the Georgica Pond watershed. There are a number of projects that we're engaged in, whether it be the Cove Hollow stormwater culvert pipe investigation and looking at ways to remediate that. This particular project that we're going to talk about today is at the state rest stop on 27, right at the head of Talmadge Creek. This is a major input area into Georgica Pond. And, we're trying to work together on this location. It's a state rest stop, and as I understand it, once the planning and design portions of this project are completed, that the state will be ready to fund the actual construction. And do we have Kim Shaw and John Jilnicki with us to present this?
I'm here. Kim, are you here? I see Kim's name there, but I don't know if she's on or not. So basically, there's Kim. So basically, there's a Friends of Georgica Pond where it was able to obtain funding from the county in the form of a match grant type funding, where the county will contribute up to $75,000 towards the project, which is developing final plans and engineering specifications. The way the grant is structured, though, they don't really get any funding until such time as the final plans are being developed. The preliminary work, there's various tasks. The final design and plans is the sixth task. The first five they've already done. I believe the first three, they need to get survey and wetland mapping done and hydrological and surface analysis completed. The estimated cost on those is totals $25,000 more. And then the $75,000 from the county will come in to cover the cost towards final design and plans. So if we match those funds, we can certainly apply. I guess we would cover the survey and wetland mapping and hydrological part of it for now in total. And I kind of need a little bit of clarification as to whether those funds are coming from the water quality funds or there's another source of funding, so we can just clarify that for the memo. But that's my understanding of the project so far. I don't know, Kim, do you have anything to add to that, or?
That was a great summary, John. So basically, this is the gateway to East Hampton, and we have significant surface water runoff entering Georgica Pond there. Dr. Gobler has documented the poor water quality in the area. And I think we're committed to moving forward to help reduce the contaminated water that's entering the pond there.
As I understand it, John, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this type of project would be an eligible project under the water quality funds, portion of the CPF.
Yes, I believe it would. Sure. Sure. It's remediating the runoff into the pond. It certainly improves environmental conditions significantly, hopefully. I think it's a qualified project. Sure. Tim, do you have any concerns about that? I don't think so, right?
No.
Yeah.
They did get 0.25% money, you're correct, from Suffolk County, and they have an opportunity to apply for water quality fundings for our first round in January.
So I think, at least from my standpoint, it would be, it's an eligible project, and I think we would want to try to fund it in that manner. It is directly impacting the water quality within George Pond, which is a threatened watershed. And, we've made a number of efforts there working with the trustees, been very active, as well as your department, Kim, and Friends of Georgia. There's been a lot of headway made with the installation of IA systems, alternative waste treatment systems around the pond, because we know that, septic systems are also contributing to poor water quality in the area. But I think you get a lot of bang for the buck here, where you have a major source of runoff input from highway, and so if the board is supportive, I think we should look at funding it in that way. Short of that, I think our share would be somewhere in the $38,000, if I recall correctly.
Well, the total project is estimated at 150, and their grant is at 75. So I think the idea, I think it was we were going to match their funding up to a maximum of 75, provided the project actually cost that much, which we're not anticipating it would be that expensive, but it could be, I guess. I don't know. We have had other projects that have not had an engineering cost that high, so I think that's a very generous number, and we should expect it to cost less than that, I would think.
So one of the other developments in this location is that the restaurant immediately adjacent, Il Molino, was recently purchased by the Peconic Land Trust. And in speaking with the Peconic Land Trust, they would be agreeable to working on stormwater remediation in the area and using a portion of the property perhaps to help remediate that issue, which is so negatively impacting the pond. So that's terrific news, I think. And again, working with our not-for-profit partners, I think we can make some significant inroads into correcting the problems, the long-standing problems that we've seen, legacy issues and whatnot, of development on our water bodies.
I think what Kim said, it is the gateway to East Hampton. The topography draws everything right down into that basin there. I think it's an important project for us to move forward. I'm really happy we're getting to this point right now, finding the funding, get to the design, because it just over the decades of driving by it, you always know that it has to have a better design. The legacy design that the state put in there, DOT, just isn't working anymore. We're much smarter than that. So thank you, Kim. I would thank I think Sarah and the Friends of George Capon for moving this forward also too.
Can I just ask a question? I was always under the impression the rest stop was in the village. Is it the village there or no?
I believe only a portion of it is, Kathy. But it's certainly, we derive our CPF funds from contributions of the village, and the village
sure.
Certainly been involved. The village has been heavily involved with, these issues with George Capon. They're also a partner. And I know they've been also quite involved with the Cove Hollow culvert as well. So we're kind of all in this together.
Yeah, no, I just wanted just clarification that it was, it's the New York State highway. It's in the village. It's in the town. I support the project, and I think Water Quality Technical Advisory, Committee, if they haven't already looked at this, I'd love to see it go through there and take the funding from there.
In looking at the GIS map, the actual rest area is just outside of the village. The village line parks around just to the east of it. But in any case, I know it spans both jurisdictions, and the village has been very helpful and cooperative along with the other not-for-profits in the town in trying to address these issues. Any other comments, board members, questions? So next steps, John, we have, do we have a resolution
I have it submitted, not for today, I have it submitted for the next meeting.
Right.
I wanted to get some of the answers to the questions we just talked about, actually, which I think I have clarity on now, but I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page before we did the reso, so we can finalize the MOU. I think we should make reference if the funding source is going to be the water quality funds, and I just want to include that in the MOU, that's the source of our funding.
Okay.
All right.
Board members agree with that approach?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you both very much, Kim and John, for that.
Thanks.
We'll move on. But before we move on, Michael, do we have any callers on the line?
No, there are no current callers on the line.
Okay. We'll move on with our last topic for discussion this morning, and that is the New York Climate Act, Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. And we have Gordian Rocky with us to present. Gordian, are you with us?
Oh, I hope so.
Here he is.
Lauren, there we go. Lauren as well.
Here.
So let me just say that this presentation was given to the Energy Sustainability Committee, and we were very pleased to see it. It was something that I think you'll all enjoy hearing about and seeing, the steps we can take to move on to, address climate change in our area. So I'm going to leave it up to Gordian, who is a master at giving this. And Lauren, thank you for stepping in and also working with not only energy sustainability, but working with this presentation. So Gordian, go ahead, please.
All right. Sharing the screen. I hope you can see that.
Yes.
And thank you for the opportunity to give you an update on the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which is now the law of the land, and will help us to achieve our 100% renewable energy goals here in East Hampton. So I'll give you a quick outline of the presentation, and Lauren and I will handle part of it each. So we'll tell you about the targets, the timeline, the structure of this new law. We will go into a little bit of detail about the analysis that the state has already done as to how these very aggressive energy targets and greenhouse gas emission targets can be achieved. We will look specifically at a white paper that the state has published as to how we're going to achieve 70% renewable electricity by 2030. And then we'll discuss a little bit the impacts on the town and our energy planning here, what it means locally, and the need for speeding things up and scaling things up, both statewide and here in the town of East Hampton. So with that, I'll hand it over to Lauren.
Thanks, Gordian. So in July of 2019, Governor Cuomo signed into law the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, or the CLCPA, which set the most ambitious emission reduction standards in the country. This photo here is at the signing of the law with former Vice President Al Gore, who founded the Climate Reality Project and has for many years brought awareness to climate change and the dangerous impacts it's having on our planet. As well as Senator Todd Kaminsky and Assemblyman Steve Engelbright, who both introduced and sponsored the bill. The passing of the CLCPA is an enormous step in the right direction to mitigating the effects of global warming and climate change, in addition to reducing emissions and pollution, creating healthier communities and a growing job market, and increasing access to cleaner, more efficient, and affordable energy solutions for New York. Next slide. So the CLCPA mandates that all sectors in New York State's economy be carbon neutral by 2015 and achieve an 85% reduction in carbon emissions below 1990 levels, with an intermediate goal of a 40% reduction by 2030. These emission reductions are expected to be achieved through a combination of renewables and energy efficiency measures. The CLCPA calls for 100% zero carbon electricity by 2040. 70% renewable electricity by 2030, 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind by 2035, 6,000 megawatts of distributed solar by 2025, 3,000 megawatts of energy storage by 2030, 185 trillion BTUs of on-site energy savings by 2025, and it also includes commitments to climate justice and a just transition. And it's also worth mentioning that New York Renews, which is a coalition of over 180 environmental groups, community groups, labor and social justice groups who were instrumental in moving the CLCPA, is also working on a new law, the Climate Community Investment Act, which would raise $15 billion every year to build a just transition in New York State. So achieving the state's new energy standards will be no small task. It will take the collaboration of multiple stakeholders, state agencies, working groups, to develop a scoping plan scheduled to be completed by 2023, as well as measures to track greenhouse gas emissions and implement the actions of the scoping plan moving forward. The process to develop the scoping plan can be viewed by the public. The schedule of upcoming meetings, as well as past meeting materials and recordings, are available at climate.ny.gov. And there will also be the opportunity for a public hearing on the scoping plan before it is finalized. Next slide. So a 22-member Climate Action Council, co-chaired by the acting president and CEO of NYSERDA and the commissioner of the Department of Environmental Conservation, was formed to develop the scoping plan. The council consists of multiple agencies and appointees working with several advisory panels and working groups that, as you can see, represent many different sectors. Next slide. And the CLCPA also places great importance on addressing environmental justice and a just transition away from fossil fuels, requiring that 40%, but no less than 35% of overall benefits of spending on clean energy and energy efficiency programs, projects, and investments be received by disadvantaged communities. The Climate Justice Working Group provides strategic advice for incorporating the needs of disadvantaged communities into the scoping plan. And the Just Transition Working Group will help to ensure an equitable transition for New York's workforce towards the state's renewable energy future through developing a forward-looking jobs report, identifying workforce training needs, and assessing opportunities to put former power plant sites into productive use. So that is just some background on the CLCPA and the work being done to achieve the mandates that it has set. I'm going to pass it back to Gordian, who will continue with what future actions need to be taken.
Thank you, Lauren. So I'll dive into the analysis that was done for the state by a consulting firm called Energy and Environmental Economics. These are their slides that I'm showing you here. This was presented to the Climate Action Council at one of their meetings. All of these documents are public. The meetings are recorded, so anyone who wants to dive in deeper, you can look that up on the state website, on the climate.ny.gov website. Really terrific resources. And those resources are now available to us, and they will make our job of planning and analyzing this locally a lot easier. So here we see essentially a trajectory between 2020, where we are today, 2030, where we will have 70% of electricity generated from renewables and the associated greenhouse gas reductions. And then by 2040, we'll be at 100% clean and renewable electricity and further greenhouse gas reductions. And by mid-century, we'll essentially be at zero greenhouse gas reductions. That's exactly where we need to be. That's what scientists for many years have been telling us we need to do in order to maintain a livable climate. And that's what the state plan is designed to do. An interesting part of this analysis is that by 2030, as they point out here, key technologies like electric vehicles and heat pumps will need to make up, by 2030, about half of new sales. We'll get into that a little more in the following slides. What you see here is, we don't have to get into all the details, but what you see here is what our emissions would do if we just continued with business as usual. They would decrease slightly, but we would not get anywhere near where we need to be, which is down here. And that's what the analysis shows. They have two separate paths that they're analyzing. We don't have to get into that. It's more or less the same thing, but that's where we need to be, and hopefully we will be. So looking at the specific sectors, we start with the transportation sector. What you see in this graph here is they're predicting that electric vehicles, light-duty vehicles, will make up between 35 and 50. Between 60 and 70% of new vehicle sales by 2030. Medium and heavy duty vehicles will make up 35 to 50%. That'll be a main driver, a key driver in how we are going to decarbonize the transportation sector. But another really important part of this transition to electric vehicles and other vehicles that are not burning fossil fuels for transportation is that the efficiency of an electric vehicle is much greater, much better than a conventional powered vehicle. So what you see here in these graphs, this is 2020, this is 2030. What you see is two things. One is the amount of electric vehicles increases over the decades. But the other thing you notice is that the amount of total energy consumed in the transportation sector decreases every decade. And that is because of the great improvement in converting energy to motion in our transportation sector. And that's primarily through the use of electric vehicles. So now we'll take a look at the building sector. You see a similar picture there. You'll see that we'll have to make sure that we'll see dramatic improvements in energy efficiency in our buildings, and that we also electrify our buildings, meaning heating systems will have to convert to heat pumps. So again, you see the same trend here. Each decade, you'll see a greater amount of electricity being used. This is primarily for heating purposes in buildings, and a lesser amount of fossil fuel being burned. And you also see a reduced energy consumption every year. And that is, again, because these new heating systems are much more energy efficient than fossil fuel boilers, oil and gas and propane boilers and furnaces. So on to the next step, which is one of the targets that the climate law has set, as Lauren already showed you earlier, is 185,000 tera-BTUs. I'm sure you don't typically deal in tera-BTUs. I don't either, but to give you an idea of scale, that would get us nearly 1/3 of the way to the interim greenhouse gas reduction goal of 40% by 2030. So the building sector is going to play a major role in this transition to renewables and meeting our climate goals. Very important. Speaking of buildings and the building sector, you've seen this slide in the presentation you received from NYSERDA on the New York stretch code. I just wanted to put that back up again because it is really essential that we adopt a more stringent code. The governor has set a goal of being at essentially net zero buildings by 2031, which means if we adopt the New York stretch code today, we'll make a big step forward in that direction. But then we need to keep going. That is really just the first step. And we need to essentially adopt a new, stricter building code. Every code cycles are typically every 3 years. And that has to be a 10% improvement in efficiency in buildings. And this is doable, but of course that responsibility rests with the state and local municipalities like East Hampton that have been leading on this front. We have done this before, as you can see here, looking back between the 2006 building code and the 2012 building code. We had that kind of dramatic improvements in building energy efficiency. So we can do this again, but it takes action on our part to make this happen. So as you've seen, we will, in order to achieve these targets, we will need to electrify a lot of sectors, the transportation sector, the building sector, as well as the industrial sector. What that means, of course, is that our energy use will shift from fossil fuels to electricity. That means this is the two scenarios they're studying. Doesn't matter really which one you look at. They're very similar in this respect, but it essentially means that between now and 2030 and 2040 and 2050, we will see an increase in electricity demand and a corresponding decrease in demand for fossil fuels. That's called beneficial electrification. It improves efficiency and it allows us to generate 100% of that electricity from renewable energy resources, thereby essentially decarbonizing not just the electricity sector, but these other sectors as well. So end-use electrification is instrumental in eliminating greenhouse gas emissions statewide and here in East Hampton. So just to take a look at this slide here, there are, of course, great differences in terms of the availability of renewable energy resources in different regions. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of them here downstate and on Long Island, New York City. The potential for solar is relatively limited compared to the rest of the state. You see about 10 gigawatts of solar potential on Long Island and 36 gigawatts upstate. Offshore wind, it's the other, or wind generation in general, wind turbines. Offshore wind is a big driver down here, downstate, with about almost 16 gigawatt envisioned, and then upstate, the total of land-based wind is only about 9 gigawatts. And then what we'll see over time here, and again, we're they're showing the two different pathways, but they're very similar. But the big picture here is that what we'll see every decade is a shrinking amount of fossil fuel use. That's the brown stuff here, gas and fuel oil, and a growing amount of offshore wind, land-based wind, solar, hydro, and a little bit of bioenergy. So as you can see here, by 2050, the majority of our energy will be coming from wind energy, a good chunk from solar energy, some hydro, and very little, actually no fossil fuel generation here. There will be a sliver left of nuclear generation that would come from existing plants, not any new nuclear generation. And the 70% target that the state has set for 2030, wanted to give you a few key insights on that. That's an interim goal, which of course also will make it easier for us to achieve our goals. The state staff, DPS staff, and NYSERDA staff, that's Public Service Commission and New York State Energy Research Development Authority, published a white paper which has a lot of very useful data in it for us as well. Here you see the anticipated electric load in 2030. It'll already begin to start growing. The base demand would have been about 130,000 gigawatt hours. The anticipated additional load from heat pumps that we're already seeing coming online would be another 10,000, and additional load from electric vehicles, another 9,000. So that demand in 2030 will have to be met, 70% of that, right? This is 70%, will have to be met from renewable energy sources. Now, we already have constructed statewide or contracted about half of this. So this is solar farms and other renewables and offshore wind already under contract, and other renewable energy sources. So we're about half of the way there to our statewide 70% by 2030 goal. The rest still needs to be procured, and NYSERDA and the Public Service Commission are working rapidly on procuring the remaining amounts that will be built between now and 2030. So that's good news for us, because by 2030, we'll have in the LIPA grid at least that amount. I just want to show you what our portion of that will be. You can hardly see it over here because East Hampton is a relatively small town, but nevertheless, we play a very important role. So out of those 105,000 gigawatt hours, we will have to generate about 430 or so from renewables to meet these goals. But of course, our goals go beyond that. We have 100% renewable goals for electricity and all other sectors by 2030. Here's what LIPA has committed to so far. LIPA is committed, they say, to meet the goals, the targets spelled out in that white paper that we just saw, and that includes a certain amount of solar, deploying 30,000 heat pumps island-wide by 2025, 180,000 electric vehicles by 2025, significant amount of battery storage by 2030, and 1,125 megawatts of offshore wind as part of the larger amount of offshore wind that's already being procured by NYSERDA. That'll be LIPA's share only. Over here, you see where they stand. So, for example, on heat pumps, the 30,000 target by 2025 has not yet been achieved. Obviously, they have about 5,250 heat pumps and so forth. 17,000 electric vehicles currently. They hope to be at 180,000 by 2025. So they're going to ramp this up very quickly. But the good news is we now have a lot of analysis, a lot of data, and that really can help us do our planning here locally. So all of this is exactly, as I said earlier, exactly what the doctor ordered, or is exactly what scientists told us we will have to do in order to safeguard our climate. We need to stay at or below 1.5 degrees Celsius of average global warming. So if we start today, we can still make it to zero by mid-century. If we would not even continue on the prior trajectory, but if we just manage to level off emissions for up to 8 years, then we would have used up our entire carbon budget, which we can't afford to do because that would exceed the 1.5 degree Celsius threshold. We would see dramatic and irreversible effects of climate change, which of course we have to prevent. So starting today, we still have a chance to make a descent to a safe level of carbon emissions. It's a very steep descent now to zero. If we would have started in 2000, it would have been a lot more comfortable, but we missed that window of opportunity, but we still have a window now. It will close rapidly if we don't accelerate and scale up very quickly. So here's just a quick thought on the need for speed and the need to scale up. I want to tell you about an experience that with something I've been working on for the last 20 years. We set an island-wide goal back in 2000 to see 10,000 solar roofs installed by 2010. We missed that target. We eventually achieved it and then kept growing. Over the last 20 years, by this year, roughly, we have 50,000 solar roofs installed on Long Island. That was quite an achievement, and we were all, everyone in that coalition was very proud of making that happen. When you think about it, that's not fast enough because we have about 1 million roofs on the island. So if each one of those roofs were to get solar power, if that were possible, just hypothetically, you can do the math, how long that would take. It would take 400 years. And that's simply not fast enough for obvious reasons. So I think we need to think seriously now about speeding things up by considering mandatory requirements versus just relying on voluntary action by people. I think that's an important thing we have to keep in mind. And we need to scale up dramatically, not only speed things up, but also scale things up dramatically in order to make it. We have a very small window of opportunity left. But what that means is essentially implement aggressive policies, codes, which we've already done, but continue that journey, follow up with the New York Stretch Code and stricter codes every few years and other laws. We need to electrify essentially everything, electrify the transportation sector, electrify the building sector, and then generate that electricity entirely from renewable energy resources. So looking back in 2014, we were the first town and the only town in New York State to adopt 100% renewable energy goals. You can all be very proud of that. We are all very proud of that vision. 5 years later, New York State adopted such goals in the form of mandates and a law. And having that statewide framework, we can now plan much more comprehensively. We can incorporate in our planning the research, the analysis that the state is doing. We can include that in an updated East Hampton Climate Action Plan. And we need to act, I think, as you see clearly now, very quickly and very decisively on implementation. With that, I'll hand it back to Lauren just to make a quick pitch here for further information.
Sure. So we've talked about our Energize East Hampton initiative. Peter and the board members have talked about it. This initiative started in 2018, and it is an opportunity for members of the community to access programs to help them save energy and reduce their energy costs, as well as explore solar. And the programs that we have offer free home energy audits and discounted costs on solar installations through a program partner that we've been working with for a couple of years, Green Logic Energy. And we're constantly evolving the site, energizeeh.org, with information for the public on energy efficiency and renewable energy, on what the town is doing, and on presentations and other sorts of material that they can access if they're interested. We have a newsletter that we try and circulate regularly for anybody that is interested in signing up for that and receiving updates, as well as presences on social media, Facebook, Instagram, to follow Energize and the town in our actions towards our energy sustainability goals, and how the community can also take part in that as well.
Thank you.
Great, thank you for the presentation. I think that the last slides with this speed and scale really should be, no pun intended, lighting a fire under us so that we can understand that we need to, really ramp up when we can. And, I think part of it is also educating the community on where we are and what we need to have and get done, and also how climate change is now affecting our community right now. I mean, the amount of storms, the amount of wind, the erosion that we see, the rise in sea level already with raising, our infrastructure has to be considered, what's happening with infrastructure. And I'll talk about that in my Montauk CAC report as well. So I just really want to, thank Gordian and Lauren, and they've been a great help to the Energy Sustainability Committee, and really a great help to all of East Hampton in moving towards 100% renewables. And that's where we need to be, and do our part. We all need to do our part in addressing climate change. So thank you, and I'll see you at the next meeting for energy sustainability.
Thank you, Gordian and Lauren and Sylvia, for your efforts on the town board's behalf and on the community's behalf. We clearly, had set goals that we're striving to achieve with renewable energy and to reduce fossil fuels. And today's presentation really, I think, emphasized that we have pathways forward and we have choices to make. Some of those pathways will result in us really putting at risk our future and the future of our children and their children. And, our opportunity to act has now become even shorter, as demonstrated by some of those slides. This is not a time to look for the perfectness and everything. We need to absolutely push forward. Energize East Hampton has helped put solar roofs within reach of many of our residents. Some folks have taken advantage of that. I've taken advantage of that myself. It's reduced my utility bills by half, and I'm also producing more energy than I use in my own home and putting that extra surplus renewable energy back out onto the grid. This is something that we all have to own. We have to really take hold here and consider the steps that we as individuals can take and take responsibility for where we are and where we want to go. And, we're going to be continuing as a town. And I've been very pleased that the town board's been so supportive of these efforts over a number of years, and we are moving forward. And we need to keep that momentum going and really expand it. So thank you, Sylvia, again, and Gordian and Lauren and all of my fellow board members who've been supporting these efforts. At this point,
I was actually hoping to make two comments, if I could.
Absolutely, Kathy, please.
So, Lauren, when she opened her presentation, talked about Al Gore being at the signing of the CLCPA. And I was fortunate enough, and I guess it was March of 2019, to attend the climate reality training and became a climate leader. So I get, I'm on their email list. I get a lot of information, and I'm part of a local chapter. And one of the things I found interesting was that the Pew Research Center had done a national survey earlier this year. And what they found is consistent with public concerns over climate and the environment. 79% of Americans said the priority for the country's energy supply should be developing alternative sources of energy, such as wind and solar. And that to shift consumption patterns towards renewables, a majority of the public, 58%, says government regulations will be necessary to encourage businesses and individuals to rely more on renewable energy. And when I read that, I think to myself, that's my charge. That's our charge, as government. Fortunately, East Hampton Town, New York State have been leaders on this, but as Gordian demonstrates, we need, speed and scale. And, I look forward to more projects that we can, work on together. And what was also interesting in that study is that when they took a more granular analysis of the geography, Americans who live less than 25 miles from a coastline say that climate change is affecting their local community a great deal or some, because they see the effects, with their own eyes, as opposed to folks that live, 300 miles from a coastline. The other thing I wanted to say is that I'm wondering, and I don't know, maybe you folks have talked about this at Energy Sustainability Committee meetings, or Lauren in your department, but I think we could be doing more with town buildings as far as, I know we all have, the smart thermostats, the Nest thermostats, and we're supposed to be programming them so that they go off when, all of us go home, and they lower the temperature on the weekends. But I don't think that that's always the case. For instance, this weekend, I went into town hall and it was 70 degrees in the offices, and that's, wasteful. So I'm wondering if there's, if we would want to ever have a policy on what the temperature should be in our buildings, and I can understand, like, we have, drafty windows, so it would have to be a range, or maybe there needs to be more education for folks on how to set those, smart thermostats, so that we can really have them working for us, so that we're not heating or cooling spaces that aren't being used nights and weekends.
So to that point, Kathy, some of us were working here on the weekend, but beyond that, your point is well taken. And, the town hall complex is slated for replacement of the windows, which are single pane, leak like a sieve, frankly. And so we'll be looking to replace those shortly. And I believe that work will start this spring. That will be a huge savings in this particular building. These old buildings are truly wonderful, but we need to make sure at every opportunity that we continue to press for energy, the reduction of energy consumption. That, as you saw in the slides today, is a critical component, and no one sector is going to solve this problem. We have to address it in every sector, whether it's the actual production of energy, to the use by homes and buildings, or in the transportation sector. So, we can check on as to why those maybe that particular thermostat wasn't programmed correctly, but I do know there are some folks that are working here on weekends. Anyone else? Okay, at this point, I think we still have a caller on the line who's called in while we were having this discussion. Michael, is that caller still on the line?
Yes, in fact, we have 2 callers right now, so I will unmute the first caller on hold right now.
Thank you so much.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon. Yes. Who's calling, please?
Yes. Hi. My name is Paul Munoz, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Energy Sustainability Committee.
Hi, Paul. Welcome.
Hi. I just wanted to real quick just give a thank you to Gordian and Lauren for a great presentation, and to the town members for putting this on the agenda, and also to our chair, our committee chair, Lena, for suggesting the presentation. And basically, I just wanted to highlight that this act has very actionable items that that can be implemented on a local level. And I just want to emphasize to the community to just become more, aware and want to educate themselves, because these things are affecting us today, and they will just continue to keep affecting us. So that's all I just wanted to say on that.
Paul, thanks so much for calling in. We appreciate your participation on the Energy Sustainability Committee. I have to say it's a really terrific group that you're involved with there. And thanks to Sylvia for chairing that.
And thanks to Paul, because he's the vice chair. So thank you, Paul, for all the efforts that you put into this committee.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Stay safe and be well. Michael, do we have any other callers on the line?
Yes, we do have an additional caller. I will unmute that caller right now.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is Jessica James. How are you today?
I'm sorry, can you just state your name again? I couldn't quite make it out.
Sure, it's Jessica James.
Oh, Jessica, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm putting myself on speaker. Maybe that's going to be clearer. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine now.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. I just want to second everything that Paul just said. I was going to say the same thing. Also to say what a terrific job I think the Energy Sustainability Committee is doing. I thank them for their hard work and important work. And I want to piggyback off something that Councilwoman Burke-Gonzalez just talked about with the town leading the way in the community. I think it's a very important point. I think it needs to be very visible what the town is doing in terms of their own energy sustainability policies. And this may be ignorance on my part. I am not sure how much of these recommendations have been implemented in town projects. For instance, the Amagansett housing that was built by the town, which is terrific. But I was surprised not to see solar panels on the roof. And I'm wondering if there was a concerted effort to incorporate energy efficient and energy generating systems. And I just want to say that I think that should be included in any town projects going forward. So that's really all I have to say. I would just encourage the town to continue the great work, but also to make energy efficiency standards very public and a priority for any projects you engage in. Thank you.
Thanks for calling in, Jessica. We certainly, I think, need to publicize what we've done in terms of reworking our energy consumption here and tracking it. We have actually been quite successful through our efforts, and I think we saved something close to $100,000 to date in energy costs. With regard to the recent affordable housing project, that is actually a housing authority project. It's not being built by the town directly, but the reason they do have the buildings oriented for solar, and due to funding constraints, did not initially put solar on those buildings, but that is something that certainly can be added. And I do know that they had a very rigorous standard that they had to meet for energy efficiency of the units, insulation, heat plant, all that sort of thing. So, we do appreciate your comments because they really do highlight what we need to do. We need to lead by by our actions as well. So thank you so much for calling in. Appreciate that. Michael, do we have any other callers on the line?
No, we do not.
At this point, I'd like to move on in the meeting to liaison reports.
Sure. So I just, as I do every meeting, just give an update on the number of meals that we've delivered to date to our seniors, those folks in our community over 60. We deliver 5 frozen meals, and as of last week, we've delivered 48,827 meals, and it's an incredible testament to the folks in Human Services and Senior Nutrition Program and transportation, everybody. It's adult daycare. It's all hands on deck over there, and grateful for all that they do. They continue to make weekly wellness calls and can pick up groceries, prescriptions, and other essentials as long as folks have called in and prepaid on their credit card. And, as Peter opened with the spikes that we're seeing with COVID here, I'm guessing that we're going to be getting, more folks in the community reaching out to us to do those errands and do the providing meals. So anyone that would like to be included, they should call Human Services at 631-329-6939. The Police Reform Committee met. I'm sure, Peter, you're going to be giving an update in your liaison report, but we're forming a subcommittee to develop an anonymous survey, and Loretta Davis and Fred Doss and Jeff Bragman have volunteered to work with me on that, and we'll be presenting that at the next meeting. And then, talking about, our efforts in renewables, and, brought to mind the rain event that we had on Saturday and the climate crisis that we find ourselves in. It dropped 3 to 5 inches of rain and left some of our roads flooded, roads and basements flooded for that matter. And I spoke to Steve Lynch this morning, and the average rainfall here in a given year is about 40 inches. And in 2020, we're looking, to have it an average year. But 2019, it was double that average. We had 80 inches of rain in 2019. And unfortunately, not all coastal communities like ours were spared in 2020. This weekend, I read that the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season shattered records, and in the process highlighted the already devastating impacts of climate change. The first record, the named storms for the 2020 season totaled 30. The previous record was set in 2005 with 28 named storms. In fact, the Atlantic hurricane season went through the entire alphabetical list of 21 storm names for 2020 and had to move to the Greek alphabet for only the second time in history. The second record was that named storms to hit the U.S. mainland during the 2020 season totaled 12. The previous record was 9 in 1916. Hurricane Laura was the strongest and most damaging U.S. hurricane to make landfall in 2020, hitting southwestern Louisiana in late August as a Category 4 storm with 150-mile-per-hour winds. It is tied as the 5th strongest hurricane on record to make landfall on the continental United States. And the third record was that storms to rapidly intensify, whereby wind speeds strengthened 35 miles per hour in a 24-hour period during the 2020 season, totaled a record-tying 10 storms. The previous record was set in 1995. In the early 80s, the odds of a rapidly intensifying storm were roughly 1 in 100. Today, it's closer to 1 in 20. Clearly, the climate crisis is making stronger, more intense storms more common. And again, fortunately, we were spared this time. But I'm sure we can all agree, as we saw in Lauren and Gordian's presentation, that we need urgent action to cut our fossil fuel emissions and shift to renewable energies like solar and wind. And that's what I have for today.
Thank you, Sylvia. Kathy, sorry.
Well, it sounded like my report.
It's just.
So thank you, Kathy. Thank you for reminding us.
David?
I thought Sylvia was going, no problem. I was going to bring up 114 and the flooding. That's what I had.
Yeah.
I know we were watching it recently. Again, from Saturday, the stream flooding that we were having tested a lot of our drainage. So again, we are now having even more coordination with the state as far as that intersection for safety, and then also for hydrodynamics and the evaluations going on. So we'll be bringing information to the board moving forward. I saw some videos of that intersection just from Saturday also, and it's dangerous. And so we're looking to take care of that too. And I completely agree with everything what you just said, Kathy and Sylvia also, and how global warming is playing to that. I want to let the board know and the general public know that the SCOUT, the Suffolk County Aquaculture Lease Program, put their amendments up for the 10-year review to the legislation. They did that on December 1st. There's going to be a public hearing on this set for December 15th, 2020 at 2 p.m. at the general meeting of the Suffolk County Legislature. Instructions to participate can be found by going to the Suffolk County New York Legislator.us website, or also contacting Sarah Lansdale, how you can give information or participate into that public hearing for their 10-year review. Also, the DEC recently released the draft deer management plan for New York State. It's ready for public review. The initial one was released in 2011. The draft plan can go to the DEC's website. Public comments will be accepted through December 28th, 2020, or by mail to DEC Deer Management Plan, New York State DEC, 625 Broadway, Albany, New York, 12233. I'm going to have a resolution on for today. Thank you, Carol, for assisting with this. It is for part of our Water Quality Technical Advisory Committee for funding. There's a small little change to it. The owner of the Crow's Nest property that operates the restaurant through an LLC, Salt Beach, is a tenant. They want to switch over the name. They own both in 100%, meaning the restaurant and the land, but they just wanted to change the contract to the tenant. And I want to put this up today so we could execute that contract this calendar year. So I'm going to have that with your support. Nothing's changed with the funding lines. Nothing's changed with the amount that's been requested, the project, or actually the amount that's going to be awarded. Let's see here. Once again, the DEC also announced, and we discussed this the last couple of weeks, the Marine Fisheries Relief Program is open for applications through December 31st, 2020. This is, again, Governor Cuomo announced $6.7 million in federal funding through the CARES Act. This is for anyone in the commercial fishing industry or that for-hire industry that can demonstrate a greater than 35% revenue loss between the period of February 1st to July 31st, 2020. Please go on to the DEC's DEC's website, also to the commercial fishing aspect on that website to get more information. Again, the clock is ticking on that one for our commercial fishing industry to help deal with their losses for the pandemic. I know we've reached out to the members of the Fisheries Advisory Committee. I've talked to a couple on the phone recently that will be applying. Also, the DEC is holding the 2021 quota for commercial fishing, a distribution meeting. This is going to be done on via the web, and this is from MRAC, and the Marine Resources Council. Marine, help me, Peter, MRAC. All the acronyms I'm losing. It's a New York State Commercial Fishing Resource Council. This distribution meeting is going to be on Wednesday, December 9th. This Wednesday from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. This year, Menhaden and horseshoe crabs will be added to the discussion. It'll be a virtual meeting. Please register to participate in the meeting, and you go also to the DEC's website to participate for that. Recently, I've been outreach in the last couple of months. We started looking at this last calendar, early this calendar year, 2020. Sounds like a long time ago. We put into the capital budget for some renovations or additions to the Montauk Skate Park. I've had some discussions with local parents and individuals that want to participate in that potential additions. There's been some additional funding that had been fundraised for a long time ago. So I'm going to be meeting with them to discuss potential ways that we can rehabilitate, make it safe, fun, enjoying the Montauk Skate Park. I'll work with Sylvia, and I'll continue to bring that forward to the town board as we potentially move forward on that. Let's see. Lastly, I got an email from the MTA, and this is MTA from Hector Garcia from Governmental Affairs, where they've scheduled 6 virtual public hearings. This is more for the public. To solicit public comments on the MTA's 2020 fare and toll proposals. Obviously, as we know, probably everything is going up. If you wish to speak, there are 3 meetings. They had one last night. The next one is happening 2 hours ago. They have one on Wednesday, December 9th at 5:30, Monday, December 14th at 5:30, and Monday, December 21st at 10 a.m. You must register to speak. You can go to the MTA's website for transparency and affairs or call their public hearing hotline at 646-252-6777 or send a letter to the MTA Governmental Communities Relations Department to get your comments in there. But I just wanted to make sure that the public was aware of all this upcoming information in public hearings. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Sylvia?
Sure. The Community Housing Opportunity Fund Committee met. We are looking for new members for that for 2021. So if you would like to become a member, please call my office at 631-324-2620 and give us your information, and we'll make sure that you're on Zoom meetings. We've made a slight time change. We are going to be meeting the second Thursday of every month at 3 p.m. We also considered some work that Fred Thiel is doing, which is working to, again, pass the legislation for the 0.5% or 0.5%, if you want to look at it that way, the tax on real estate transfers for affordable housing. We discussed if those do again get passed and get signed by the governor, how those funds could be distributed through the town, through the same type of program that we have with CPF and with water quality. We were looking at down payment assistance, mortgage counseling program. Capital projects would obviously include new structures, new buildings for affordable housing, and also recapture of existing affordable housing. Then we could turn around and sell it under the affordable housing program. So those were, again, things that we need to work on, and we hope that this legislation passes the legislature again and is signed into law. Business Recovery Group met, as always, at the very beginning. Robert Ross gives us an update of what's going on at our local hospitals and with coronavirus issues and testing. As Peter already said, things are, for the county, are not going well as far as infection rates. And, you know, if there's any good news in this, Robert said that that doctors are now have protocols in place, where when this pandemic first started, they were sort of not sure which directions were going to be the best directions. They now have those protocols in place, and people are prepared. The doctors are prepared. The hospitals are prepared for, you know, patients that come in. Our patients are pretty low. They have kept their 50% increase in coronavirus COVID-19 beds available. They're nowhere near that, but anyway, we do need to keep an eye on what's happening in our community with coronavirus and make sure that we do the things: wear a mask, wash your hands, and stay socially distant. We also talked about the communications firm that we've hired, which we put out information on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I would say that the three subjects that we're going to be working with the posts now through Christmas and the holidays is about safety first. And this is for our businesses as well, because we want them to be able to stay in business and to be open for business. The second is we want to encourage everyone to buy local and to make sure that you look at local businesses that might have gift cards that you can also buy and put in people's stockings would be great, or for people that you give gifts to that you know, help you in your work throughout the year. Gift cards are always a great way to go. And the third would be to travel issues and to travel safely. So we want to make sure that everyone, if they do meet with family members and friends, that they do it in a very safe and way. The Montauk CAC met last night, and we had a presentation by Laura Tuman, and she is the head of CCOM. And she had talked about webinars, that series that they're going to start doing. And the first one is on Wednesday, December 16th. And it is at 4 p.m. And I think, Peter, you're going to be involved in that one. And the the title of that is Montauk's Coastal Resiliency and the Future of Our Beaches. And then again on January 14th, they're going to do another webinar on wind farms and their impact. And they're going to have that with Julie Tai, who is head of the New York League of Conservation Voters. So both of those would be really interesting webinars. If you're interested, go to the CCOM website and you can look them up. Other issues that we looked at was the beach subcommittee report. And I want to thank David Lease for working with Ray Cortell on that. And they seem very happy with the interaction that they're having and the results that they're getting from David and his group, and hope that they can continue to meet. They're going to meet, I think, David, with you on Thursday, and have a Zoom meeting so they can meet face to face. And again, thanks again for all your efforts in making that move forward. The issue that, yeah, thanks. The issue that came up and is of concern and talks about flooding again, the issues that are at the intersection of Second House, North Shore Road, and Industrial Road. And that is also where we are or PSEG is moving the substation from one location on Industrial Road to a little bit higher section that's closer to that intersection. And it was very flooded this past weekend. And what's happened in the last few years, and since I've been on the CAC as their liaison, that area gets continually flooded, and then in the wintertime it freezes. And so now you've just got a skating rink that is dangerous for cars. If they do, go through that area, it could be jaggedy ice that's there that they're worried about damage to their cars. So I did have a conversation with Steve Lynch and have been talking to him again this morning. And PSEG, LIPA has said that, in part of their contract with us in moving their substation, they will raise that road. And again, this is all due to climate change. We are having to raise roads. We've had to raise the road on Girard Drive. We're going to have to raise the road here. So this is all, mitigation. This isn't a solution to climate change, but this is mitigation for us at this moment. And so Steve just texted me, and I'm wondering John, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit too. So they were going to be in contract, although the contracts are not signed yet, to do the work as a permanent raising of the road. Obviously, that's not going to get done this winter because we're already seeing, that the cold is setting in, the asphalt plants are going to be shutting down. So PSEG is willing, this is according to Steve Lynch, is willing to raise the road as a temporary repair for this winter. But they want this worked out so they can do the permanent repair by next spring. So we need to make sure that that contract is signed for spring. And if we're going to be able to accept them to repair a temporary repair for this winter. And they have a company that will be able to do that asphalt work for that temporary repair. John, so Steve Lynch is asking if that's okay to move forward with that. And then the town board needs to also weigh in. So
for the temporary repair?
For the temporary.
The temporary repair is fine if they want to do it. The way they structured the contract, they have us doing all of the design work and the actual construction work of the road improvements. I contacted them. That seems to be the way they want us to do it. They're willing to pay for it, but they want us to actually do the plans and to do construction work of the permanent solution.
So can we meet either today or tomorrow? John, you, me, and Peter, and then we can form the rest of the board so that we can make sure that this repair gets done, this temporary repair gets done, and that we've, crossed all our T's, dotted I's to make sure that we're ready to go for spring so that we can get the permanent repair. So, again, right now we can't pump that water into Fort Pond. That's against the DEC laws. So that's not something that can happen. There's, thousands of gallons of water sitting there right now. So this is something that I think needs to be at the top of the list, at least, for the moment, to make sure that these people feel safe and traveling back and forth on these roadways. So
Sylvia, I'm very comfortable with that temporary fix. I was out
Okay.
there also on Sunday, and it's bad this time. The water's not going to go anywhere. So
Yeah.
if they want to come in there and temporarily fix it, and then we work on that other solution, however it means, you have my support.
So Sylvia, I'll follow up with you on that after the meeting.
Okay.
And, I know that was a problem last year and in the past. And again, as we stated earlier in the meeting, this is another symptom of the amount of rainfall that we get in single episodes. And with the winter coming and the freeze cycle starting, that can really be a problem there. I know at one point, I think we had about a foot of water standing at that location after some very heavy rains, which then froze, had a sheet of ice over top of that, and cars were getting stuck and get through. And we had to get the highway department down there with a payloader to break the ice up and push it out of the way. So yeah, I'm happy to work with you to try to get this temporary fix in until the permanent solution comes.
All right, that's great. Thank you so much. And the last thing, there were some smaller issues that we're working on, but one of the other bigger issues was the beach fencing that continually gets, I guess, more or less destroyed during these storms that come up. The fencing is on private property, but they're concerned that it is affecting the beaches, and as the debris goes on the beach, people step on the fence, some of the wire, and it also gets washed into the ocean, which it's also dangerous to get it washed into the ocean. So I've had a conversation with Tony Littman, and he's going to go down and look at it right this minute for today to see what can be done after the storm and picking it up. But the bigger issue was, and we may be talking to the trustees, when the trustees have this issue, they actually cite the homeowner, and they are given a bill for the cleanup that has to happen by the trustees on the beach. Since the trustees are not in Montauk, then they were wondering if how the town would handle it if residents do not pick up their debris and let it continue to litter the beach and litter the oceans, if we can send people down and also have something in our code where we can ask the homeowner to pay for the repair for the cleanup that the town has actually had to do.
I think that would be do it by a performance bond on their application, because any fencing is supposed to be temporary. You apply for that as an application to put beach fencing in, and then you can ask for a type of performance bond if they don't remove it, if it becomes flotsam out there. That might be one thing to do. And also get rid of stakes, only use wooden stakes too.
Yep.
Yeah, that's been a perennial problem, and it's only gotten worse. Dune restoration projects begin in the springtime after the erosion season, and trying to keep them out of harm's way is almost impossible at this point. So I think you're right. We probably should be taking a closer look at those areas that are outside the trustees' jurisdiction and how we deal with them.
Okay, that's great. So, David, good suggestion. So,
and one option on there too, Sylvia. Sorry, just brainstorming, is that part of one of the recommendations for the LWRP is that Natural Resources and also Land Management has been doing aerial photos and drone videos of the shorelines, trying to do that at least once a year so we can see where fencing or maybe illegal coastal structures have been and how our shorelines are morphing. So we can use that as part of our enforcement techniques too. And I have those on file I can share with you.
Wow, great. Thanks, David. I appreciate it. And that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Jeff, you have a liaison report for us?
Yes. On Saturday, we met at the Wainscott CAC for a very lengthy meeting, I would say a record-breaking meeting. It was to discuss Wainscott Incorporation. And I know that we've had some folks come to town board and complain about misinformation in the presentations. So I think a rather large group of the public was eager to listen to what would be presented. This meeting today focused, on Saturday, focused on the proponents of Wayne-Scott Incorporation. And I have to say that contrary to some of the remarks that we've heard, it was quite a factual presentation, presented a lot of informative quantitative information, numbers, budget projections, all of which I'm sure will be, subject to be questioned and tested as time goes on. But it was definitely factually based and not emotionally based. Their proponents brought in a new map of the proposed boundaries of the incorporation. Some opponents to the idea were critical of some of the exclusions in the map, which excluded some neighboring homes in order to stay within the total acreage limitation that the state law requires for incorporation. And there were issues about what would happen to folks who were not immediately included in the incorporation. Could they use the beaches that were included in the incorporation? There was some back and forth discussion on that. It appears that would ultimately be a policy decision. And the proponents of this incorporation referred to the fact that it's pretty typical for villages, once they incorporate, to later expand by annexation. And the village of East Hampton has done it on any number of times. They brought in the treasurer of the largest village in the state of New York, the village of Hempstead, to talk about how villages are run. And they also had a group of consultants from the Novak group, which was responsible for doing a pretty extensive economic analysis. I don't really want to go into all the detail of it, but essentially they explained their methodology, that they had researched a number of incorporated villages that were comparable in size and character to the proposed village of Wayne-Scott, and examined their financial records over a period of the last 5 years, and adopted a policy of minimizing income and maximizing expenses in order to come out with a very conservative assessment of the financial risks and possibilities that would be involved in incorporating. So it was an interesting discussion, and it got into some of the details on taxation and a great deal of detail on how services would be provided. There were questions, as I said, on beach regulations. There were questions about the control of the airport, which is owned by the town, but would be within an incorporated village. And it was sort of it was really a pretty, I would say, emotions are certainly high on this topic, no question. Frankly, it was the largest Zoom call I've ever been on. I think there were more than 90 people on this call, including maybe some people from Amagansett who were interested in the topic. But it went through sort of a careful assessment of proposed costs in all the details: highway repairs, capital improvements, rental space for Village Hall, anticipated tax revenues, other highway costs. There were questions about how the school would be managed, and that of course would remain within the control of the school district, and a lot of very detailed comparisons of assessed valuation and market value of properties, and how that would affect tax levies, and what the benefit or detriment would be to folks who would live in a new incorporated village. So, I mean, it was very informative. As I said, it will, of course, be, I think, questioned and debated. And I can't really call which side predominates in this discussion, but I can say it was illuminating, I think, to both sides. There was a little bit of controversy as well, where there was some disputes, and hopefully in the next few weeks and months that will get worked out. My only comment about the process as a whole is that I think it's a good thing that ultimately, if the proponents of this plan can get enough legal signatures on a petition, there will be a process to review the petition. The supervisor reviews it. If it's adequate, it's then approved, and it sets in motion a democratic process for an open vote. So ultimately, I have no position on this particularly. Like many of the folks on the phone call, I'm listening and learning. I think the comforting factor for me is that there's, at the end of the line, if they can get the amount of signatures that they want, there's a democratic process that will create an opportunity for real deliberative kind of exchange that I think will help. I have no idea what may happen or what won't happen, but I do think it was a well-run meeting. I have to congratulate the chairman, Carolyn Logan Gluck, who does a good job of being objective and very neutral and very composed. And so all I can say is it was, as I said, a record-breaking meeting for the Wayne Scott CAC. I don't think I remember ever being on a call with them in the time that I've been with them that had this kind of attendance. So there's a lot of interest in it.
Jeff, if I may just, this has been a really, I think, important topic for the hamlet of Wayne Scott to discuss. And over the last previous meetings, we'd asked earlier on that that those Zoom calls be recorded so that members of the public who may be predisposed for half a day on Saturday morning would have an opportunity to actually hear the discussion and not just simply the presentation on the proponent's website, so they could hear the dialogue and understand the questions being posed within the community and have a better sense of what was discussed in what was nearly 4.5 hours. I think the town board members, many of us did attend that Zoom call, and I was kind of dismayed to find out that none of that was recorded for others within the hamlet of Wayne Scott and the town of East Hampton to be able to hear this discussion, because I do think this is an extremely important topic both within the hamlet and within the town. Do you have any idea why that recording didn't take place? And can you please request that future meetings be recorded again like they had been in the past?
Peter, I'm not sure your position on this has been that clear, because my recollection from the last time we went around and recorded something was that you asked for a recording that you could use and then advised the CAC that it was not to be disclosed to the public. And I think that's
not the case at all, Jeff. Absolutely not the case.
That's what I recall.
Yeah, I did request that the meetings be recorded and for the purpose that they would be available and disseminated to the public.
Well, I think that message didn't get out clearly, because I think the message given to the chairman the last time it was recorded was that it was only for your use and not to be disseminated.
I absolutely never made that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I completely agree with
this
recording.
point, in fact, that was the interpretation made for my request. But,
I just want to say I completely agree with the idea of recording and making those recordings available to the public. I don't see any problem with it. I think that more disclosure is better than less disclosure. I'm not even, or do you know for a fact the call wasn't recorded?
That's what I understood. I think Joanne.
I don't even know.
Reached out for it, so.
Yeah. It certainly would have been better if it were recorded, because it was, as Peter said, it was a 4.5 hour meeting with And it wasn't just, a venting session. It was much more than just folks getting up and, being emphatic for their position. There were consultants.
It's a very sensitive discussion. I think it would be of service to anyone in Wayne Scott who has questions about the issue. But so I appreciate if you follow up on that.
Yeah, I'll make it clear, but I think there was a little bit of a mixed message on that. And then the only other news I have is also of Wayne Scott, and that is that we were able to dodge really rough weather on Saturday and go down and have what we call the soft opening of the Wayne Scott Green, which is really looking terrific. It's going to need to grow out, and I'm sure there's going to be more work on it, but it's really looking good. And we wanted to have a smaller opening because the Del Mastro family and we know that the green has been named in honor and in memory of Rick Del Mastro. Was about to leave town, and we wanted to get something done before they left town. So we had a very nice and intimate gathering of a smaller group of people, and we all had a chance to. The whole town board had a chance to say a few words, and it was great to see it coming into fruition. And we're hoping that we get through the worst of COVID and can do a happier, more celebratory opening in the spring. And maybe Kathy will bring a ribbon on that date and a big scissors so we can cut it. If you help me hold it, we'll do it. And David was there too. I was a little worried because I hadn't heard from him, and I was glad to see David there because he did work through the Nature Committee on the management plan that was obviously very good and very helpful. So I was glad to see the whole group there. It's a really good moment, and it is a really a great effort by everybody on the town board on behalf of Wayne Scott. That's an important space that's created for Wayne Scott. The one thing we really want to do for that hamlet is to lessen the tendency of people to view it as a drive-through, and this is a real step in the right direction. I can see folks coming out there and having coffee on that green and sitting with kids, and hopefully it'll happen in the spring and maybe even without masks, although that may be a little overly optimistic. But it was a nice conclusion, and we hope for a bigger celebration when the weather turns and circumstances change. I just wanted to mention that I was a part of the Police Reform and Reinvention Committee, and it seems like it's off to a good start with some interesting discussion that I will eagerly await developments to see how it evolves. But it's important questions to talk about, and a good group of folks committed to community action. I found it very informative to just listen and watch. And that's about what I have today.
Thank you, Jeff. The town board was notified that the lift boat named Laredo Brazos will be returning to the offshore waters of Wayne Scott to continue with soil borings at locations that will be 780 feet and 1,470 feet from shore. And the boring that took place earlier, 2,160 feet offshore, was completed in November, and each boring is anticipated to take 2 to 3 days, weather allowing. The work vessel will continue to work around the clock to expedite the completion of that subsoil testing, and the vessel may be moved during the evening hours. So I wanted to make sure the community is aware of that. And perhaps, Jeff, you could, if you haven't already, send that notice out to the Wayne Scott CAC so they can distribute that within their community there. We also, in trying to forward our goals for renewable energy, in addition to our work on offshore wind, I met with LIPA CEO Tom Falcone to discuss CCAs and renewables as part of our climate action plan goals. We discussed incentives and what LIPA can do to help us reach our goals. It was a very informative discussion. I will be asking Lauren Steinberg, who was also present during that meeting, to send around a summary of that discussion. But it looked at ways to increase Long Island's renewable energy assets, and also a discussion of if there were particular energy renewable projects within the township, how that might interface with the grid, which, as you know, LIPA is responsible for, and the discussion about purchasing renewable energies as part of the CCA. As Jeff just mentioned, we did have our initial meeting of the Police Reform Committee. This is a New York State mandated effort that will review police departments across New York to find ways to improving both the public's perception as well as the operation of our professional police forces within New York State. We had introduction portion of the meetings. All the members of the committee meeting, many of them meeting maybe for the first time, went around, had introductions, and I'm just really pleased with the number of people who from various backgrounds who have been willing to serve on that committee. I think we're off to a really good start. We'll be working on Kathy Gonzalez, who is helping me with the with the meeting, and that committee will be has formed a subcommittee of members to look at putting together further community outreach to engage the community through a survey process. As you may know, we had initial listening discussions, which we publicized widely in both English and in Spanish, and we had an interpreter available as well. And we're still encouraging members of the public, if they have ideas, comments, or concerns about how our police department operates or ways in which they could improve outreach within the community. We've asked for those comments, and EH Police Reform is, we have a website for that, as well as there's a Dropbox. If you have anonymous comments that you'd like to make rather than emailing, you can drop those comments addressed to the town supervisor, police reform, and the Dropbox is a gray mailbox just outside town hall. So I'm excited that that's underway. We will be putting together recommendations and a plan that will have to be adopted by the town and forwarded to the state prior to April 1st. We had a meeting of the Town Property Management Committee yesterday. Our discussions centered around the Springs Library building, its condition, and parking. We, had moved to put a new roof on the building. Unfortunately, that's delayed as it was discovered that the central chimney in the building is deteriorating, and we'll probably have to address that issue before we can do a re-roof of the building. There was also continued discussion about Boys and Girls Harbor Pavilion. The recent discussions have really centered about placing the pavilion closer to the road next to the existing parking and basketball area and open field. It's been felt that keeping vehicles concentrated more at the entrance of the park rather than the more remote section and its immediate location next to the open field and the trail network is probably a better location. So there was ongoing discussions about that. There was also some discussion about second house renovation, which is well on its way. I believe the exterior has been completed. David Lee's been really instrumental in helping to move that on. Handed that off to him when I became supervisor. That's now completing the second phase. We're looking towards third phase. There was some discussion about the Save America's Treasures grant, which is a federal grant. So we're going to investigate that to see about eligibility to offset some of the costs. We have now entered the erosion season, and that's, I think, been evidenced. Anybody who goes down to the ocean beaches with any regularity. Many of our beaches are showing signs of seasonal erosion, which every year seems to get worse. We've had in Montauk, for instance, ditch plains pretty well stripped of sand. There's a lot of debris that's been washed up. And while we generally don't clean beaches in the off season, if there are piles of man-made debris, Sylvia mentioned the issue with fencing earlier, we'll address that. We're not going to remove every log or every piece of driftwood. That's just a natural occurrence, but certainly we'll take a look out for any kind of hazards. I will just say that because of the vernal nature of that entranceway at South Edison Street, there's a ramp there to make the transition for vehicles. That often is exposed this time of year. If you're a pedestrian walking through there, it's very difficult for us to keep sand on it. We're going to try and do that, but there may be some exposure of that concrete block. So if you're transiting the area, please be careful about walking through there. We do have scheduled also our first wireless communications committee meeting coming up this week. Looking forward to that effort getting underway. We know that there have been historic gaps in coverage here in East Hampton. And due to the fact that so many are now living here year round, working remotely, studying remotely, that it really has put a great deal of pressure on the infrastructure within the town. So the committee will be looking at that. In addition, as the board knows, we recently hired consultants, wireless engineering consultants, to help us both review our existing wireless code and also the situation that we're facing with capacity and gaps in coverage. As the board also knows, we've entered into negotiations with the Police Benevolent Association as well as the Superior Officers Association into contract negotiations. Those I think are off to a good start, and both sides are negotiating in good faith. In Wainscott, the Hamlet Plan has been adopted. We adopted all the Hamlet plans in May, and it's time to start moving forward on implementation of those recommendations. And to that end, I've met with council and the planning department, as well as Councilwoman Sylvia Overby's liaison to planning, to talk about ways to move forward. I think in implementing Hamlet plans, we first started in Wainscott back when I was a freshman councilman in proposing that the town initiate Hamlet studies. And as a Wainscott liaison, I did so. When Larry Cantwell came into office shortly after that, we decided to expand that to cover all of the hamlets. And last May, we adopted all the Hamlet studies. So we're looking at that, and I think it's important to look at the infrastructure portions of that plan first, because obviously any future build out will rely upon those infrastructure aspects being reviewed, designed, and put in place ahead of maybe some of the other aspects. But this will also entail there are recommendations for rezonings to help also guide and effectuate that. As Jeff said, the Wainscott Green had a soft dedication on Sunday, and thankfully the weather did clear off, although it was quite brisk and cold. It was really nice to meet with the family of Rick Del Mastro, a wonderful man, a wonderful family. I have a resolution on today to put together a dedicated fund for park improvements. Those wanting to donate in his memory, that those funds will be dedicated solely to the future development and improvement of that park. And I just want to take a moment and also thank the Friends of Georgia Pond, who were instrumental in helping the town acquire that parcel originally. It was a contribution of funds that they had raised of $300,000, which helped push us over the top. As many will remember, that was the site of the former swamp and Star Room. And that building had sat derelict for probably a decade or more. That blight was removed, and now it's going to be a really wonderful park dedicated to the memory of somebody who was really special in Wayne Scott, Rick Belmastro. I just want to reiterate also that, as Sylvia said, this is a season, especially now, to shop local. Contact your local stores, do your shopping there, arrange a curbside pickup if necessary, but try to keep the money in the community. I know with fears of COVID, people are concerned about transmission, but see if you can do a workaround to be able to, be a local shopper. Many of our businesses are struggling, and that has repercussions all through our community. So do what you can this holiday season to keep the money here local as much as possible. We have seen the last several days over 6% average positive rate countywide of all the tests given. This is a huge increase from where we were just not that many weeks ago. We were going along at 0.8%, under 1% really for much of the summer and into the early part of the fall. And beginning in October, we've seen a large uptick. As I said at the beginning of the meeting, the number of cases in East Hampton year to date, as of October 17th, after 32 weeks of the pandemic, was 276 cases from March until October. That doubled in less than 8 weeks. We now have over 551 positive cases year to date as of December 6th. So this was anticipated. This was talked about. We know that the best ways to prevent the spread of the disease are not to gather socially, to wear your masks, wash your hands as we wait for the vaccine to be widely distributed and administered. And that's all I have for liaison report.
Can I just ask a question, Peter? So I know that you have a resolution on to create the reserve for the Rick Del Mastro Park.
Yeah, I'm gonna amend the language.
I was hoping, if we could include beautification or because
it's Len had put this together and it came on late, and Carol put it up for me, and I read it, and I would when we get to that, I'll suggest that some different language.
Great. Thank you.
Peter, I'm going to maybe embarrass you a little bit, but one of the things I didn't say in my report was that Peter did send a letter to the Public Service Commission in the state of New York clarifying and promoting community choice aggregation for electrical use on Long Island. And it's one of the things we've also passed legislation on. So the letter was well done and well sent. I don't know if you put it out as a press release, but anyway, we did send it to all of the Energy Sustainability Committee members, and we didn't get it sent until yesterday. But quickly, I just want to say the chair calls it a stunning letter and thanks you very much. Another member says, I'm doing double backflips here. What a letter. Value added local energy programs, local job creation and clean energy workforce, addresses the pass along costs of stranded capacity assets, funding for mechanisms for local and expedited review. Spectacular. Thank you, Peter, and all those involved. Another member wrote, let me get to hers. Oops. Okay, hold on. There was one more.
That's enough, Sylvia.
She said it was a spectacular letter, and she is proud to have you as our supervisor representing.
Those are very kind words, but let me just say that nobody does this alone. And Sylvia, your work with the Energy Sustainability Committee as liaison and all the dedicated members of that committee have really done such a fantastic job. And I have to absolutely mention Natural Resources Department which really has been so helpful and active in helping us as a board move things forward. And last and certainly not least, I would thank my own staff, Ann Bell, and particularly Joanne Pilgrim, who, have helped all along the way. So, I appreciate the praise and thanks, but there's plenty more to go around, and I'm just part of this team of really exceptional people. And I'm very proud.
I hope that you do put that letter up on the website, or perhaps make a press release out of it, because I've never had responses like that people call it, stunning and doing double backflips. That's pretty good stuff, I think.
Okay, maybe just preaching to the choir.
That's true too, but in some ways, but this is a community effort, and there are a lot of members of the community on energy sustainability that are in the corner of getting this completed and done, and it just played into the presentation that we had today. So I just wanted to bring that up.
I appreciate the acknowledgement, but again, there's so many other people to thank as well, and keeping us on the right track here. So thank you for that. So at this point, Michael, do we have any callers on the line?
No, we do not. There are no callers.
I guess we don't. So I will enter, let's see, we have resolutions, and who has the first one?
I think I do.
Is that you, David? I believe you're first.
Let me just pull it up here. Yes, I'd like to offer Resolution 2020-1141. This is to amend the Resolution 2020-1018, the CPF Water Quality Funding Round to 2020. Again, whereas Dog Beach Incorporated, the applicant and sole owner of 4 Old Westlake Drive, Montauk, has been awarded funding for the upgrade of the existing commercial sanitary system to a new low nitrogen wastewater treatment system from the Crow's Nest Restaurant and Hotel, reducing a large source of pollutants, whereas Salt Beach is the tenant of 4 Old Westlake Montauk and operator of the Crow's Nest. And whereas the individual owner of both Dog Beach and Salt Beach have requested the grant award to be granted to Salt Beach Incorporated and has submitted proper documentation now. So overall, we're looking to authorize the supervisor to sign a funding award agreement with Salt Beach Incorporated for the upgrade of the existing commercial septic system for Crow's Nest Restaurant and Hotel located at 4 Old Westlake Drive, Montauk, with no change in funding amounts or budget line.
So, David, I just have a quick question. Is there anything in the code that says a tenant can be awarded this over the owner? In this case, they're one and the same, but I just don't understand.
It would run with the land, would it not?
I'm so sorry. What was the question, Peter? I don't know the answer to that, Sylvia. I don't know. If you want me to, we could table. I can get some more information on it. About it.
Is there any time is of the essence here?
I would think it'd be the end of the year. I think we can try to do it for next Tuesday. We'll put it on for next Tuesday.
The question you have, Sylvia, is the award?
No, the award is that, the change in tenant to owner, is that something that we've seen in the past with and is there anything in the law that says it must be the owner that's requesting the money and not the tenant? So I just, that just.
Don, are you with us here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you address that issue?
I'm not aware of anything in the statute that prohibits the tenant operates the facility. The owner has given consent for the installation. And in this case, it happens to be one and the same person who owns both LLCs completely. I don't know if we've seen their lease or not, but I don't know.
Well, if it's the same entity, is there really any issue in this particular case?
In this one, it's the same. It's actually the same. The owner of each LLC is wholly the same person in this instance. So I don't.
So is there any difference issue with not moving forward in this instance? And maybe Sylvia's question, something we can look into for where they're not the same?
Yeah, I really, Lauren did mention this. I think it was, Melissa had run this by me. I didn't see an issue with it since they are one and the same. And I did request a consent from the landlord entity to allow the tenant to do the install, and they did provide that to the town.
Okay. So it sounds like you're comfortable with this. The other board members?
If John's comfortable with it, I'm good with it.
I'm comfortable with it because of, you know, them being the same ownership. And again, Sylvia, if we continue looking, if there's a different ownership.
And okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pass. Carried. Jeff?
Resolution 2020-1142 approves the hiring of subcontractor Bonnie Engelbright to help out in the assessor's department. She'll be payable at an hourly rate of $35 an hour, not to exceed $7,000, effective January 2021.
Right. Bonnie Engelhardt, second.
All in favor?
Did I mispronounce that?
You said Engelbright.
Oh, sorry. Focused on election.
Tis the season.
Right, Bart? Yeah.
Resolution 2020-1143 is to retain services for training of the tax receiver. The former tax receiver, Rebecca Ron, has resigned, but has offered to assist the town on an interim basis with training and guidance. And the town board, in this resolution, engages her services at a cost not to exceed $7,500.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pass and carried.
Resolution 2020-1144 authorizes payment of a 2019 past due Town Board Verizon invoice due from 2019 in the amount of $100.68.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. Resolution 2020-1145 is to create a reserve. Rick Del Mastro Park. Resolve the budget offices establish a special reserve account for the purpose of accepting and designating donations to be used for the improvement. I'm going to amend it here by adding use for the improvement and beautification of the Rick Del Mastro Park at Wainscott Green, Wainscott.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session.
A motion to go into exec session for personnel litigation and I think CPF.
Contract and acquisition.
Contracts and acquisitions. Thank you. It is now 1:27. When would you like to convene?
Board's preference.
Can we say 2:15, 2:30?
15 works good. 2:30, either one.
Either one.
2:15.
2:30, dogs.
2:30, did Jeff will
Dogs have to go out.
That's a long walk. Okay.
So what did we end up with?
2:30. Just
2:30.
dogs.
All right.
Beautiful.
Okay. Thank you all very much. I will send the link shortly.
Thank you.
Everyone out there, stay safe, be well, and just guard against the spread of COVID. Thank you.